What is up, everybody? Sleepy Panda 27 here, back at you again with another Aegis weekly recap. This week is pretty exciting because it was the first week of the Champions League playoffs, which you can see the results of in front of us here. Ironically, the Champions League is probably the very little information provided. It's probably going to be the shorter section of our video today. Um, so let's get started. So, where we left off was we knew our six teams that were going to be in the playoffs bracket. And Azir's Ascended got first place, as did Norris Tea Drinkers of their respective groups, so they got a bye week. And it was Aatrox's Darkin versus Misfortune's Powder Monkeys, and Swain's Flock versus Lee Sin's Dragons. And you can see the results of that right here. Aatrox's Darkin swept Misfortune's Powder Monkeys. The person who swept, by the way, was Zemex, or 10 Stews, on Mordekaiser, Nora, Akshan, Lee Sin, Heimerdinger, Victor. So good job to Zemex. It probably feels pretty good to sweep a team. And then we had Swain's Flock versus Lee Sin's Dragons, which Lee Sin's Dragons beat Swain's Flock 3-2. So close. My teammate and I, Spids and I, had the opportunity to cast these games because we had our bye week here. And it literally came down to the very last possible game. They were so even. It came down to literally one match, and it was the most intense set ever. I'll provide a link to that set on. It's been uploaded. The VOD has been uploaded to YouTube, and I'll send a link to that set if you want to watch it. It's pretty exciting, and there's a lot of good. I think there's some good VODs to review. If you're someone who wants to review VODs for improvement, so extremely tight set. I do feel bad for Swain's Flock. I'm a little bit sad that they got kicked to the relegation tournament. I would have been sad if Lee Sin's Dragons did too. At this point, nobody bad is left, right? And I think that Swain's Flock added a lot of culture to the current Aegis environment that I'm worried we'll lose out on a bit as we progress to our top four. But these are our top four. Only one team is not going to make money now. One team is going to break even, and then two of these teams, which are going to be our finalists, will win. So, not much more to say than that. It was a very intense set. You can always check the lineups yourself, and that's how it goes. So very quickly, very rapidly, let's move on to the Ascension League, the AAL, and the relegation tournament, which is completely figured out at this point. So last time we only knew the two teams that were dropping from the Champions League into the relegation tournament, which was Saplings and Victor's Glorious Evolution. Well, we had the last week of the Ascension League, and we have some scores here for you. And we can see that these are our top four teams. So we have Teemo's Puff Caps that went 12-3, incredibly dominant over the whole season. This is probably no surprise to anybody. They had 3 separate weeks where they went 3-0, including this final week. So that's pretty brutal. And they're just an incredibly dominant team. Notably, I want to also take note of some of their players. If we look at this, Mana and Hayes Johan are absolutely crushing the tournament, and both of these players are very high up on ladder, or at least were before the ladder reset, right? There was like a ranked ladder reset like a week ago or maybe 2 weeks ago at this point. But these two players I want to give a big shout out to because they have just been completely dominating. Congrats to Dial for finding these two players. Because I think Dial was on Teemo's Puff Caps the last season and added the 3 players. And Mana and Johan are truly showing, I think they're names that people hadn't really heard of prior to this Aegis season, to my knowledge. And I think it's very obvious that they're, modern LOR dominators, right? I think there's a few names who have really excelled in the post LOR death phase of LOR, and I think I want to give a big shout out to Mana and Hayes Johan for definitely proving themselves to be completely dominant. There's a couple more people I want to shout out, but they'll come in a bit. Let's continue looking at standings. Second place is Brahms Mighty Poros, but you can see it was incredibly tight. Brahms Mighty Poros and Barge Chimes were tied, and I believe it came to set tiebreakers of that Brahms Mighty Poros was 2-1 into Barge Chimes. So barely eking it out. Congratulations to both these teams. They win the prize pool for the Ascension League, and they get the best spot in the relegation tournament. It's going to be very easy for these two teams to sort of advance into the next season's Champions League. Let's look at our next top four, the other two teams who will have an opportunity to be relegated to ascend to the Champions League for next season. And that's Barge Chimes and Trundle's Trolls. And you can see that Barge Chimes was the unfortunate loser of the tie with Brahms Mighty Poros, and Trundle's Trolls managed to pull ahead. Last week, Gangplank was actually second place, I believe, and Trundle's Trolls was in this fifth place spot. And, last week I said Gangplank, despite being second place in the whole thing, actually had a really tough week ahead of him. And unfortunately, that tough week was realized. They were against some difficult, they didn't have the free win of Garen's Vanguard because Garen's Vanguard FF to the last week. And I believe they were also playing, Puffcaps, who went 3-0 and is clearly one of the most dominant teams. So it's unfortunate for them, but I do think they had a really tough week. So and they still made it super close. This is unfortunately a really close bracket, except for Garen's Vanguard, who ended up FFing the last 2 weeks. I can't really blame them. So this is our team, and that means that I want to shout out a couple more players. If we look at player stats here, I want to give a shout out to Synergy, because you can see Synergy being on Gangplank's Powder Kegs, being the team that just barely couldn't make it into the relegation tournament, couldn't advance to next season's Champions League. Synergy is still one of the top performing players, and of people who played more than one set, cough cough Kasai, okay, your 2-0 isn't impressive if you only played 1 week. But of the players that have played the most, Synergy has one of the highest win rates, despite having a team that maybe didn't quite make it. And as a personal note, Synergy is someone that has also DM'd me about decks and thoughts and stuff. So I want to give a shout out to Synergy, that despite Gangplank's Gangplank Powder Kings not making it in, Synergy's performance is exceptional, and I'm very confident that they'll be able to do well in future seasons. And then there's one more shout out I want to give, which is Small Penguin, and the reason for that is that I'm biased, mainly because I love penguins, and so Small Penguin's username I like, but additionally because in last week when I was casting, I saw, or not last week when I was casting, Small Penguin made a note saying that I think they started 4-0, and then they went to 5-3, and it was just deeply unfortunate. They lost those 2 rounds, and they're like, I'm not going to get a shout out in Sleepy Panda's video. Well, yes you are. Based username, and still pretty good. Like, you're still boasting a 62% win rate over 8 sets. That's pretty impressive nonetheless, right? Top 50% of the league. So, congratulations to you. And that's that. So let's look at the relegation bracket then. What does that mean for our relegation? Because this is where, at this point, we know the bottom 4 teams of the Champions League, and we know the top 4 teams of the Ascension League. So we actually know exactly what our bracket is going to look like and who's going to play who. I think in my podcast episode, I'll do predictions of this bracket and where I think people are going to go. But you could see it's going to be Swain's Flock versus Trundle's Trolls, and Misfortune's Powder Monkeys versus Barge Chimes. Let's remind ourselves here. Let me quickly get my pen tool out. Just as a reminder, the teams that are right here, they need to win 1 game, okay? So they can lose a game, like they can go 1-1 and they'll make it into the Ascension, okay? So they can either make this one and make it right into the Ascension, they can win this one, or they'll get bumped down to this bracket, and then if they win this one, they'll make it into the Ascension League. Okay, so Teemos Puff Caps and Bronze Light Poros, the reward for winning so much is that they'll have the easiest time in the Ascension League. These teams, their worst score while still making it in is 2-1. Okay, they need to win two games. So if they win here, they'll need to go against Teemo's Puff Caps, and then they can have the opportunity to win that one to get ascended, or they'll lose that one, go down here, and still get ascended through this, this way. Okay, so they can go 2-1, but if they lose two games, they're out. And that's these four teams, which are the next best people of the Ascension League, and the teams that just got kicked out of the playoffs from the Champions League, which is Swain's Flock and Misfortune's Powder Monkeys. And then lastly, the teams that are going to have the toughest time, these teams need to go 2-0 if they want to make it in. That's Victor's Glorious Evolution, Maokai Saplings. They need to, if they lose this match, they are completely out, kicked out. And if they win, they'll make it onto here and play the winner or the losers of this match, and then they'll have a chance to go here. So these teams need a 2-0, which is going to be the toughest time. And this is what our bracket is looking like. There's not much to say because it hasn't started yet, but it will start this coming week. And I think that's all I need to say for the recap. I think that there's a lot of interesting things going forward. The Iron Man format is going to be very unique and interesting, but there's not much left to talk about what teams need to do. At this point, it's a single England bracket pretty much. Actually, the relegation bracket isn't. The Champions League playoffs is a single England bracket, right? So it's like, yeah, there's not much to say on how they need to perform in a given week or the intricacies of who they're playing. It's like, yep, the team that wins here is going to finals. The team that wins here is going to finals. And that's going to be our finals. It gets as simple as that. Relegation tour is a little bit more complex, but I just explained it, and there's not much else to say. So I think that I'm going to conclude this with which is probably the shortest recap ever. This week's podcast will probably be a little more in depth, and will cover my predictions and maybe go into a little bit more discussion as we come to the near conclusion of this season's Aegis League. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I know it's a short recap, but it was a pretty simple week. The most interesting thing was the Ascension League, but again, we sort of figured out what teams need to do, and here's their scores. Here's how they performed each week. There you go. Not much more to say than that. So, again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.